Hey, everybody. Welcome back to episode 5 of the Look Up podcast. It's your girl, Alani. You already know.
It's Roman. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
We changed the setup, guys.
We did. So for those of you who are watching us on YouTube, if you haven't yet checked out our YouTube, check us out at the Look Up podcast. But yeah, we changed it. We wanted to make it a little bit more comfortable. You know, it's easy to talk, right? If you're more relaxed and just chilling instead of like at a desk and making it feel like it's, I don't know, professional work.
Right.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah.
100%. So we wanted to make it, like what Alani said, just more
comfy,
more of those conversations
that
we've been having. Because most of the time when we have these conversations, we're in these chairs, actually, because they used to be on the balcony.
Yeah, these are out on the balcony, and we brought them inside. So thanks for joining us. I hope you guys have had a great week. Last week was fun, wasn't it? It was a little bit of a doozy one. So
it was. Jericho.
We are going to have a different conversation. Let's just say that.
We're going to try to one and done this time. We're not going to keep
no more re-recording.
Over.
We need to change this up. So I know there's been a lot of things that happened this past week.
Oh man.
There was the Hillsong documentary that came out. If you guys haven't watched that, I say recommend it. Oh, the Oscar thing with Will Smith and a lot of different, I don't know. There was so many different like analyzations of that. It was so interesting.
It was actually. A lot of Christian influencers and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I wasn't even thinking of it
teachers
in that way, you know?
And stuff like that. And of course the Hillsong Documentary, which is a huge thing. And I didn't even know was like a thing until like maybe 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I wasn't really familiar and I wasn't really following Hillsong along in this whole drama that they've been having, I guess for years with, you know, the founder and then Carl Lentz and affairs and all of that kind of stuff. But you know what that just reminds me of? And I feel like what the documentary did really well was just point out how important it is for a leader to be vulnerable.
I agree.
I think the reason why a lot of these problems happened is because the founder wasn't vulnerable. Like the original founder, Brian Houston's father, wasn't vulnerable with his weird pedophilia, whatever. And then Brian wasn't vulnerable with maybe, I don't know, how funds were being managed by the church and obviously all of his other fiasco stuff. And then Carl Lentz wasn't vulnerable about his affair that he was having. And so when things get swept under the rug like that, it's just only a matter of time before it all comes bursting out. And then, especially when you're a leader, your followers are going to look at you like, well, what the heck? Now I can't trust you.
Right.
And then it also leads them to start assuming, well, if I can't trust you in this way, what else can I trust you? You know?
Right.
And I think that's where they started questioning like the music. They started questioning the college. They started questioning not just that founder, but like all of the leadership in Hillsong, you know?
Right. Well, for me, I think, well, why is it okay for, you know, like regular musicians and regular artists to put those chord progressions, you know, they were talking about the chord progressions that make you feel a certain way. Why is it okay for them to do this for, okay, let's say in this context, monetary gain, right? But it's not okay for the church to do it, right?
Because then there's that fine line of like, does the church... that was like the whole concept. Like, is this whole big mega church just here to take people's money and recruit people to get them locked in so they can take their money? Or are they actually here to serve God, serve people? You know what I mean?
I'll be devil's advocate. Well, isn't that everybody's whole conquest? Isn't that everybody's?
Mean, with some musicians,
isn't
it's
the whole
tough. Okay, because some musicians, I feel like they can come in with a good... what do you even call that? Good intentions.
Good intention.
But then I think it can get swayed really easily, really quickly. You know what I mean? If power, money, you know, all of that they say, the girls, the glory. What is the other G? I don't remember.
Gold.
Girls, gold, glory. You know what I mean? When all three of those kind of come into it, it's like you got to be a little...
The triple G.
It's easy to be swayed into the wrong direction.
Yep. The women, weed, and weather.
Right. And I feel like there was a podcast I was listening to. Remember I told you about this with Kevin Hart, and he was talking about, it was in a podcast, I think, with Hot Boxing with Mike Tyson. And he brought up how, you know, because in the position that he's in, there's only such a small select few people that are really in there. And he said, like, obviously, I mean, if you know Kevin Hart's story, he didn't really grow up in like the richest family.
Right.
He was, very poor. And he said when he tasted the success that he has now, there's just no way that he can go backwards.
It's never enough.
And I think that's kind of what happens with musicians and things like that. And, when they taste the success of what one thing can do, and maybe sometimes it could happen in the church. I don't know. I mean, we're human. We're not perfect at all.
I think it's more so the significance.
Yeah.
I think when people start tasting significance versus success, I think that changes the whole game.
What do you feel like the difference is then?
So success is a completely different ball game. I know plenty of successful people, but are they significant in today's culture? Are they significant in...
But isn't that kind of like objective,
I don't think it's objective.
Depends on your group of people that you want to be significant with, right?
I don't think that's objective. You look at The Rock, the most followed person on Instagram. He's pretty significant. So are you just
saying that they have a big following?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're into that point of view and that perspective.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that's what significance is for them. I have a different definition of significance, obviously, when talking about this life and what you want to achieve in it. But I'm going to say for guys like that who are workaholics, who are just nonstop, where enough is never enough, that's their form of significance. They like being on top. They like being relevant.
So do you feel like that was the problem then with the whole leadership and whatever they're talking about in that whole Hillsong documentary?
Well, when you give a man that type of power, it's only a matter of time. And
that's true.
I was reading a book in class. It's called The Three Kings. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, God likes to put broken people in positions of authority.
Right. I mean, look at Moses.
Yeah. So
there's so many examples.
I think if you're not a broken person, you can end up becoming a king like King Saul, right? There's three types of kings. You can be a King Saul type of leader, you can be a David type of leader, and you can be an Absalom type of leader, right? King Saul is all about the power, all about the influence, all about the control. And then when somebody else comes along, you get jealous, right? And you start throwing spears, is what they say. Mm-hmm. But you can be a leader like David, who is a servant leader who never even threw a spear back at King Saul. Actually, King Saul ran him out of the city, and David went and hid in a cave for years.
So is this more like the intentions of each of these leaders?
Right.
The heart of them, I guess.
The heart of the leaders, right? And the third leader is Absalom, which is David's son, who eventually it gets overcome by that ambition of wanting to be a king. Mm-hmm. But that I wrote in my paper, heavy is the crown that lies on the head. There's responsibility when you're put in those positions of power. And I think that's the thing with Hillsong, is that they need to know that there's responsibility for the things that they do.
Consequences.
There's consequences. There's like I believe John Maxwell said this before, is that when leadership goes up, rights go down. Responsibilities go up. Your own privileges go down. So the more people that you lead, the less things that you can freely do like that. You know what I mean?
I think I get your point and I agree with you, but I think on the other hand of things, then that puts this big burden on a leader to always have to be perfect. Right. And I think that will lead to destruction too, because they have this mindset of like, I need to be this specific way at all times. And I think that's what happened with Hillsong, because like if someone was going through something, you can't speak out about that because you need to be this example. You need to be a quote unquote example of what it looks like to be a Christian, to be a ministry leader, to be a part of
I think
the organization of really God, you know what I mean? And
that's a problem. They need to understand the difference between God's Christian and their Christian, their responsibility and God's responsibility, and what that looks like. There's always two sides to it. There's always the actual definition, and then there's the world's definition. It's always like that. It always is, right? So it's just like, what's your Christianity and what's God's Christianity? Your Christianity may be, I have all this influence. I got to look perfect. God's is like, no, I take broken people. Have you not read the Bible?
Exactly. But I'm just going back onto your point of saying that like rights go down. I think,
Responsibilities go up.
I think responsibilities do go up, but I think that you need to remember that it doesn't mean you have to be this image in your mind of what the world creates as a leader.
What I'm trying to say is,
you know,
I'm not saying when rights go down, perfection has to go up. That's not
what do you mean by
saying.
Rights then? What is a right?
So things that you think you're entitlements go down. This is a better thing I should say.
Like what?
Entitlements go down. Well, I'm just a man. I can cheat on my wife. Well, I need to make money some sort of way so I can embezzle this money through. Well, it doesn't matter what it is. You think you're entitled to do these things because, well, I'm just a guy like everybody else. I have needs like everybody else. And you think you can do these same things that everybody else can do when you have all these eyes on you. You cannot. You can't. You just can't. And God needs you to, when he puts you in a power of responsibility like that, I'm sorry. Did God have a choice to take that cup and go and get on the cross? Yeah, he could have said no, but he had a responsibility.
Yeah.
Did he have the right to say no?
And it's true. It's Jesus did, like, he came to God in prayer a lot of times in the Bible
and
where
didn't want to do it.
He didn't want to do it. But
he didn't want to do it.
That was God's will. And that was the plan.
And he had a responsibility as someone who is chosen.
That's true.
For a calling. You don't just get to have any rights. And that's the issue with today's society is that everybody thinks they're entitled to everything. You're not.
But I think a good thing too that Jesus had was he had people to hold him accountable. So it wasn't just like, obviously he had God. Amazing. But he also kept around him his disciples that where he would speak what was going to happen to them. And I remember because I'm reading the book of the New Testament in the past 90 days. And I just finished the book of Mark. I'm now in Luke. But in Mark, there was a point, I don't even remember who said it. I want to say Peter, could have been Paul. I don't know. One of them, probably Peter. And he was telling all of them, they were at dinner and he was saying like, hey, I'm going to basically be crucified. They're going to take me. And then they were like, no, that don't happen. And then he literally said, get away from me, Satan. You know what I mean? And it was crazy. It's insane. I got to show you
Peter
this verse.
said that?
I want to say it's Peter.
Peter said I was going to get crucified?
No, Jesus is telling everybody that he's going to get crucified. And then Peter said, no, like, I don't want that to happen, God. And, or Jesus, and he just was like, get away from me, Satan.
Wow.
Which is insane. If you just think that it's like, that is the mission. And it wasn't even saying like,
it's the mission.
They weren't even being mean to him. You know, they weren't even like, mad at it. They were just saying, hey, like, I don't want that to happen to you, Right.
But it's God's will. And the devil or the enemy or whatever you want to call him will show up in the most slick ways through your friends, through good intentions, what seems like good intentions, right? And you need to have the discernment to identify that stuff. And I'm pretty sure Hillsong did a lot of those things with good intentions. And when you, I was saying earlier, like when you get to those specific points in your life, your career, in terms of influence, you have to have the responsibility to discern what's right and what's wrong. And that's why there's a prayer that says, God, please give me the discernment to know the difference between good and evil and what's right and what's wrong. So
true, because there is that gray area of like, well, is this right? Is this wrong? I don't know. And I think that like you were saying, like,
pray for that wisdom to be able to tell the difference.
To tell the difference. Ugh.
You gotta know, you gotta pray for that to tell the difference. So that stuff's crazy. That stuff is crazy, 100%. But there's a lot of groups of people out there that feel about the documentary. There's groups of people who don't even want to watch it at all because, I don't know, for whatever reason. It was Peter.
Reason. Sorry, I just found it. It's in Mark chapter 8. So he was basically telling them, I just have to finish this thought and then we can talk about it. But basically, okay, He was just saying that, like, he was just teaching them that, the Son of Man's going to suffer. He's going to be rejected. He's going to be killed. He must be killed. And after 3 days, he'll rise again. And he said he spoke plainly about this. So it wasn't even like grand or anything, the way Jesus was telling them this whole story of what's going to happen with him. It was just, hey, this is what's going to happen.
Right.
And then Peter took him aside and basically began to like rebuke him, saying like, Jesus, no. And then Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, and then he rebuked Peter, and he literally said, "Get behind me, Satan. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Crazy. So that basically is just saying, like, you do not know what God's plans are. Your concerns, what you are concerned about,
right.
It's just, even though Peter had good intentions, he didn't want Jesus to die. That's like his bestie. Like, you wouldn't want your bestie to just be like, hey, I'm going to die. Be like, no, what? Are you serious? But you do not have the concerns of God. Insane. That was so good when I read that. What do you think about it?
It's true. You gotta pray, man. Just pray to have to know God's will, because he's not a straight up God. He's not. Like, you gotta figure him out, bro. And that, you just pray to just know when he's speaking to you, and know when you can identify him.
Yes, because it can be scary when you claim things in his name and it just may not be him.
It's not him. And that's the scary part, bro.
That is the scary part.
And that's his most loyal dogs. Those are all disciples. So
right.
It's crazy. The New Testament, those four gospels, the biographies of Jesus are just crazy when you read them through.
Yes.
And what really happened and what went down. And we were reading the Gospel of John, and, John is one of the sons of thunder and one of the best looking disciples, one of the youngest and stuff like that. And his main goal was, at the end of the day, put his name in lights. He always would ask Jesus, are we going to be famous? Will they know us? Who's the best of all of us? Who do you think is the best of all of us, Jesus? It's me, Jesus. Right. And John wrote that, and you can just see the swing of like his character arc. And at the end of that chapter, he doesn't even refer to himself as John. He refers to himself as the disciple that Jesus loved. He refers to himself as that. He doesn't even put his name in it. So he starts as a disciple literally for the fame. He starts for the recognition. And by the time he's done, he doesn't even want to put his name in lights. He's like, you don't even need to know who I am. I'm just the disciple that Jesus loved.
That's, I feel like, the difference between the human concern and God's concern.
Yep. So
sheesh.
That's cool.
But that's the point I'm trying to say, is like getting around people, the right people.
Right.
That can keep you, one, accountable.
Right.
And two, really help show you like what the truth is. You know what I mean? And I think that was the problem with some leadership.
Even amongst Christians.
Even amongst Christians. I think that's the problem with some leadership, because they say, John Maxwell, to quote him again, he says, like, your people, they know the people you lead anyways.
They know you better than you.
They know your flaws better than you do.
Yep.
They see everything. And I think if you do not allow it to be a open door for when your people who you lead can come to you and say, hey, this stuff is going on, you're in a dangerous place, because you are now in this position of authority. And I think that power can get to your head, and there's no one holding you accountable for your actions.
Right. It's true.
You're just getting all this praise and glory.
It's true. We were in small group not last Tuesday, maybe a couple Tuesdays ago, and Brett said something similar. It's just like, he says, you know what the funniest reaction is when I interview people and I ask them this question, and I always just like to see what their reaction is when I ask them, what are your blind spots? Right. Mm-hmm. And he says, it's so funny when people actually have an answer to that, because you don't know.
You wouldn't know.
You would not know.
It's called a blind.
It's called a blind spot for a reason. Right. And people will foolishly say, well, I know all my blind spots, and You know, I know myself pretty well, and I think I'm overcoming them really well. You know, but what Brett's really wanting to hear is, I don't know. I would love to have somebody that could potentially point those out to me so I can learn and I can come humbly to them and know what those are. Because even when your blind spots are pointed out to you, a lot of the times it's hard for you to even accept them.
Right.
It's hard for you to even accept your blind spots. And you'll think, I'm not even like that.
It's true.
Like that. I'm
it's
not
true.
like that. You know what I mean?
Well, ego comes in the way of that. Your ego, that human ego. Or a girl, if you're a girl like me, you got Shigo. Shout out Shigo. Do you remember Shigo from Kim Possible?
Dark haired girl. She looked like Shigo.
Yeah. She was like goals for me. Anyways.
Right. So shout out Jack Harlow. But anyway, yeah, it's crazy. Hillsong, we're gonna pray for deliverance in their ministry.
But the thing is, it's not just that. It's great that, you know, there's obviously a documentary about them, but I think just church leadership in general. I think leadership in general, because if you know if this is happening like that, it's happening.
If it's happening in the church, imagine where else it's happening.
Worse and way worse, because.
And that's the thing. We got to watch
morality.
We got to watch that, because why do we care so much about it being in the church, but we're not investigating Apple?
How about at work or these big companies, right?
Why are we not investigating?
There are those documentaries like We Work. I haven't seen it, but you know, they talk about supposedly, I guess, how the leader, the founder, was just treating people terribly and whatever.
Right.
But it happens everywhere.
Yep. And just because it's a church doesn't mean that men do not reside there. There's no such thing as a perfect church. No such thing.
No, and there never will be. And if there is,
don't go there. You'll ruin it.
Yes.
If you find a perfect church, don't go there. You will ruin it.
It's true. That's another thing, though, is you can't expect that. You can't expect a leader to be perfect, and you can't expect everybody in the church to be perfect. And I think if you do, like I was saying before when we were talking, you do not leave any room for God's grace. If you are perfect all the time, then you must be God. You know what I'm saying? If I'm expecting my pastor to be perfect, I'm expecting him to be God. And how disrespectful and a slap in the face for who God is.
But how often does that happen in a church?
All of the time. I bet
they get that Messiah complex, bro.
Yes. And like, I feel like I've met people who expect their pastor and like almost praise their pastor as if the pastor's God. And it's like, hold up. Whoa, wait a minute. That's not what God intended. Down. He is just a messenger sharing God's word. That's it.
And you should never admire the relationship of your pastor and God more than your relationship with God.
With you and God.
That's so foolish.
That's weird.
Some people will be like, one day I hope to just,
have a relationship
love God
with
like
God.
Like pastor loves God.
Oh,
and it's just like, that, my
is
goodness,
crazy to
that
me.
is insane.
Because like we've talked about many times before in our other episodes, like your relationship with God is your relationship with God. And I think God speaks to everybody differently. My personal opinion. I think that I can come to God in a different way than maybe you come to God, and how God will speak to me may be different how God speaks to you, and I shouldn't expect how your relationship with God is how my relationship with him should be. Right.
And I think it was in the book of Matthew, I think, but it's just saying never compare your religion, never compare your own path, never compare your faith with another person. That's what it says. It says never compare your faith with another person's faith. So that's a dangerous trap.
It's true. If you kind of like read through, I'm obviously only in Luke, so I only read through Matthew and Mark so far, all the way through. And none of them have ever looked at Jesus, the disciples anyways, the people who was always around him, and said, wow, Jesus, you're so close with God. Like, I want to be that close with God. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they have their own relationship with God through Jesus.
They were more astonished by him.
Yeah.
than anything. They said, who is this man? He even commands the seas.
Literally. And so, yeah, we do have to be very careful with just leadership in general. And I mean, we've been part of organizations where leadership was just toxic. And again, they can come with good intentions, and they may come with good intentions. But I think if there's no one checking you and no one keeping you accountable, and you're not allowing it to be an open door for people to come in and talk to you, you know, like what we've seen in the documentary, and
you'll go on a rampage.
What we've seen in work and other organizations, I think you will turn into, your good intentions will turn sour. Will go way south. I don't even want to say evil, but it can be evil.
It can, 100%. So, and then I guess we'll wrap up on the Oscars, which is kind of crazy. How that all
okay, I didn't even watch it. I just saw the memes.
The memes hilarious. Are vicious.
There's this one. I'm not even gonna talk about it.
The memes are vicious, bro.
Some with August, and it's just interesting.
You mean our wife?
But anyways, I mean, was it real? Was it staged? I don't know. But at the end of the day, it's just like, look at how caught up we get on just dumb stuff.
Doesn't the enemy love to distract you? Goodness gracious.
There's so much going on in this world right now that are way worse than a freaking slap on the face, okay?
Right.
And we're so concerned about two celebrities. I don't even know, one slap. You
know
what I
mean? Two multimillionaires hitting each other, which is funny.
It's interesting how society, I don't know, how they view things, how they look at things. It's just, you got to remember just not to get too caught up. And that's what it is. You know, you can look at things, but don't get too caught up in it. Same thing with like the whole, you know, documentary like we were talking about. Right. Watch it. Don't get too caught up in it. Watch something. Don't get too caught up into it. But this is so of the world. They're so, you know, I'm looking at this Bible verse right now that's above Roman's head. And it's like, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Romans 12:2. That's one of my favorite verses ever. Because everything is of this world.
Right. If you really think about it. So
this whole church stuff.
I think if you got to have the mental maturity though.
It takes a lot of mental maturity.
Do your own research and check it out.
And understand and not be afraid of being so swayed. Be
afraid of being
wrong.
That's
what the thing is. Right, is people are afraid to check something out because they think they're going to get persuaded or swayed. If you're like so scared of being persuaded or swayed, then you are not grounded in whatever else you believe in anyways. If something's way negative and against what you believe in, it shouldn't bother you because you know what the truth is.
Fact.
You know what I mean?
Fact.
Like if I know what I believe is true with God and I know what I believe is true when it comes to church leadership and whatever and servant leadership, I shouldn't be offended or angry if someone talks negative about it because I know what's true.
Right. You know what is true.
I know what's true.
So you should never be like, oh, how dare someone make a documentary like that? They're so dark.
That's so like, evil. You know, when you get negative comments on like social media or something, I mean, it shouldn't bother you because you know yourself. You know what your intentions are.
It doesn't matter a name. Someone calls you out of your name because you know what your name is.
Exactly.
You know who gave you your name. You know God, what names God has for you.
Exactly.
So you should never sweat a documentary and, oh, I don't want to watch that. That's dark. And it's just like, okay. Seems like somebody's kind of shaky. Are you scared that you're going to stop being a believer after?
Because if that's the case, then you gotta check your faith a little bit.
You gotta check your faith.
Are you scared you're going to question your pastor? Are you scared you're going to question songs? Like, I think I saw that, and my opinions didn't get swayed either way. I just thought it was very educational, informative, and honestly, I think it's a really good documentary. Just to point out, and the point of that, we need to be honest and open. I was trying to say honest and open.
Honest. That's a new word.
We got to be more honest, open, transparent, hot. You know?
You got to be hot.
You got to be hot. You got to be honest, open, and transparent as a leader.
Yep.
As anyone. I think vulnerability allows for real connection, real relationship. It takes away the need to assume.
Yep.
Right? If you just know what's going on, you're never assuming.
Never. So it's a key.
It's powerful.
It's so important. It's powerful, man, especially right now. That's so, you know, I think for me, I think it was very interesting watching the stuff that unfolded over the past week unfold, because it let me know where I stood and with my faith. Mm-hmm. And I know I'll never get swayed. I know that they're just people, man.
And they're people. And I think that's also something that you have to remember is you have to give people grace. They make mistakes. They do. And people are are immature and people are sinners and we're going to continue sinning. We're not going to ever be perfect, angels. So
if there was perfection in this world, there'd be no room for grace.
And there'd be no room for God because God is the only perfect being.
Right.
And if you know that, then just back up,
So give Hillsong grace, give Will Smith grace, give Chris Rock grace for saying those specific things.
Yeah. I think I think if we lived more that way, we would be so much more at peace.
Right.
So much more joyous.
Right.
Because I think if we extend that grace to others, others will be open to extending that grace back to us. Because I know I make a lot of mistakes and I say a lot of dumb things and I'm not perfect, but I don't want anyone to feel like they have to expect that from me, and I don't want to expect that from anyone.
Right. And it's true. You sow what you reap.
That's it. So
sow that right seed. So
that's right. I mean, at the end of the day, we got to remember Psalms 121 verse 1 through 2. I lift my eyes up to the mountain, and where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth.
Yes, sir.
So
we appreciate you guys. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. Thanks for listening. Hey. If you are not yet, follow us on Instagram at The Lookup Pod, on TikTok at The Lookup Pod. And YouTube, check us out on YouTube.
Follow us on YouTube. You can watch us talk to each other.
I think the word subscribe.
Subscribe
to us on YouTube.
We can't forget to say subscribe.
We will see you guys on the next one. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.
Absolutely. God bless you. Did you know that over 40% of college graduates never read or listen to a book again? We are huge advocates of self-development and reading books, but with being busy and on the go, we don't always have time to sit down and read a good book, which is why we love Audible.
Audible is the leading provider of audiobooks. They have over 200,000 audiobooks to choose from, as well as podcasts, guided wellness, and Audible originals. Get a free 30-day trial and get access to an unlimited selection to listen to while driving, in the gym, or doing all the things you need to do in your busy life. Visit www.audibletrial.com/thelookuppod. Again, that's www.audibletrial.com/thelookuppod.